I tend to find that on a person's self-development journey, shame is one of those emotional experiences that feels kind of like an inevitability. And in this video, I wanted to talk about where shame comes from, why it shows up, why it's probably more of a positive thing than you might think, and then kind of how to navigate it to overcome that experience, especially if it's crippling, right? So I know a lot of you on this channel are here for the weed stuff, right? Overcoming consistent weed use, maybe finding a more positive relationship with cannabis. But when you're trying to overcome a vice in general, it tends to be that we really put ourselves in a position where we start to compare and contrast ourselves to who it is that we want to become, right? The version of ourselves that we want to grow into is becoming more and more obvious to us every single day. Like we're in this active struggle to move towards that version of ourselves. And when we do that, it's almost like we're walking up to the bottom of a mountain and then looking up. The natural thing to happen in that experience is for you to compare that better version of yourself to who you are now. And that distance becomes blaringly obvious, right? You're looking up at the top of the mountain and wondering like, how the fuck am I supposed to do this? You see that better version of yourself, and then you look back at who you are right now, all of your inconsistencies, all of your failures, all of the reasons why you personally think that you're not good enough, you're not prepared, you are inadequate, right? And so you become riddled by shame. Maybe not riddled by shame, but you experience some degree of shame. For many of us, it is crippling, it's overcoming, right? It's overwhelming. I would like to kind of offer you something a little bit shall we say, unexpected, perhaps, which is that I would say that shame is actually kind of a good thing, at least to some degree, right? You experiencing shame is indicative that you are aware, that you are that you are willing to reflect, really, that you're willing to take accountability for who you are right now, to some degree. Maybe you don't find yourself in a position where you're ready to act. Maybe you find that the experience of shame is overwhelming, but you're experiencing shame because you are willing to reflect, because you're willing to acknowledge that you want to be better. And so that's one of those things to give yourself credit for at first, that this shame is only happening because you are a person who wants better things for yourself, right? Somebody who experiences an overwhelming indulgence in vices, right? That smokes a lot of weed, jerks off a lot, drinks a lot, but then they don't experience shame. That's an entirely different kind of person. And in fact, I would argue that that's sort of a hell far worse than one where you experience shame, because when you don't experience shame, there is nothing driving you to change. You can wither away and die in this place of overindulging yourself and never committing to growth, and you'll die there unwittingly, right? It won't even be something that you're aware of. A better life is not even something that you're considering, and thus you don't experience shame. And so there might be, I'm sure there's a Buddhist argument here for true bliss, right? I mean, Alan Watts was a known alcoholic, right? A lot of these people were really into overindulgence, but the truth is that when you live a life like that, you know just how actually painful it is it's like a slow death, I would argue, right? I'm not saying Alan Watts is like, he was like truly, struggling, but maybe, right? I mean, a lot of the time that's where those kind of like truly bold, awake thoughts come from, is a person who has deeply struggled. And so that's one of the first things that I would offer you, is that one of the first things that you can do is to let go of the shame around the shame, to acknowledge that the shame is there to serve you, just like any emotion, right? These intense emotions are there for a reason. They are sort of maybe your survival mechanisms trying to figure out how to intertwine with a human life that is so far removed from nature. They are there to serve you, right? They are there to help guide you, to help you change, to encourage you to change, really, right? And so how do we begin to do this, right? If we're experiencing this overwhelming degree of shame, well, that would be the first step, is to acknowledge that this is inviting you to do something differently. This shame is here to ask you, is it possible that we could change? Is there any other avenue through which we could experience life that we don't have to go through this path of constant self-degradation, constantly feeling like we are betraying ourselves with every action, right? I'm gonna make another video on this idea of every action is a vote for who it is that you want to be. And that is what shame is doing. Shame is encouraging you to do more, to move towards that version of yourself where you're not constantly riddled by these negative emotions, shame, guilt, personal condemnation, right? And we'll make a video about every single one of these experiences. But for right now, one of the first things to acknowledge is that this is trying to move you. And so you need some kind of intrinsic mechanism to leverage these feelings. Okay, so the first thing that we do is to name it, right? We become aware of it, and without gripping onto it, we name it. Okay, I'm experiencing shame because I am not this. I'm experiencing shame because I continue to do this thing that I don't want to do. One of the things that I've really been talking to my clients a lot about over the past couple of weeks is just this idea of resting awareness, a present awareness on what it is that you're experiencing without furthering the shame. You do not allow yourself to experience shame because you're ashamed, right? You don't allow yourself to experience guilt because you're feeling guilty. You just name it. You just put your awareness on it, try to release from any emotion, and just be present with that feeling, right? And then we begin to converse with ourselves. Like I said, name the thing, ask yourself questions. Why am I experiencing this? What is this actually doing to serve me? Now, in doing this, it's not an easy process, I'll admit that, right? To begin to have a zero expectation, zero condemnation conversation with yourself takes a lot of practice. We are very used to condemning ourselves. We're very used to being our own biggest critic. And so for me to ask you to stop criticizing yourself, but continue to have the conversations, it's not an easy ask, and I acknowledge that. But you have to start, you have to begin. And you begin by just resting your present awareness. Now, you can do this by using meditative practices. And I know I've promised you guys a foundations of meditation video for a long time. And so comment below if that's something that you want to see. But you begin just by relaxing your mind and finding yourself in a comfortable place where you're able, or at least you believe that you're safe enough to start doing this process, right? So you relax, you breathe, you find yourself present. And you ask yourself, where is this shame coming from? Can I start to become present with this shame without being overwhelmed by it, without believing that this is part of me, right? One of the hardest things about doing this kind of third person reflection where we back up, we view ourselves from the third person perspective, almost as though we are a character in a story, and ask ourselves, where do we want to see this story progress? What changes do we want to see in the character's outlook, in the way that they communicate with themselves? And you just start to kind of nudge yourself in that direction. No shame, no condemnation, really practicing letting go of that stuff. Now, as you do that, it will become easier and easier for you to have these kinds of conversations with yourself from that third person perspective. And that's really how we do this. That's how we begin to really effectively let go of this shame. But, one of the things that I want to leave you with is that it's both serving you and not serving you, right? Really acknowledging that this experience is entirely up to you to dictate. Is the shame something that you're going to allow to be something beneficial, to be something that guides you towards change? Or is it going to be something that you're just crippled by, something that you don't see any other way but to identify with it, right? And that's sort of the difference between seeing the shame and saying, that is shame over there. Here's perhaps why I'm experiencing it. Here's perhaps why this shame has come to me, why it's clinging to me. But I'm sort of looking at it from the perspective of a scientist. I'm studying myself. One of the greatest practices of this life, right, is to become a student of yourself. I lost my train of thought. But then, to move past it, right? And that's ultimately what I'm inviting you to do here, is to not to grip to this shame as though it is a character trait of yours, but to view it as though it is perhaps an affliction, right? And something that you can overcome, assuming that you have the proper treatment, right? And so the way that you really begin to build that treatment plan for yourself is to ask yourself questions, diagnose the problem, but really commit yourself to this practice of releasing from the need to grip onto something and associate yourself with it, to call yourself that thing. I am shameful. I am ashamed, right? Maybe we start to move that conversation to, here's why perhaps I might be experiencing this shame. And I know that by having this conversation with myself, by beginning to have a slightly different perspective, I can experience something new. So I hope this video was helpful. Let me know if you have any comments, questions, drop them below. I'm always happy to have a conversation with you guys. Let me know if there's a more detailed answer that you're looking for. Let me know what your personal experiences are. That way I can formulate a more effective video in the future, really to help you personally. And without further ado, my friends, hit that subscribe button, hit that little notification bell so you know when my videos come out, and see you on the other side. Bye-bye.